I'm Jayce Doan, Blackleg Ranch, and I'll give this talk on custom grazing versus owning your own yearlings. Our place is kind of situated in between Burley and Emmons County, um, at that yellow star there. So traditionally, we were a cow calf operation. We still are. We still run a lot of mother cows. when I'm considerably younger than my other siblings, and they're probably not as much interested in the livestock portion of things than I am. And about I don't know, maybe the year 2000 or shortly thereafter, my dad had just lost his really long time hired man and was kind of working himself to death, just calving cows in March in a barn and really not enjoying anything. So they decided to figure out how to make things work with this land base. So what dad and my brothers, who were again considerably older than me, decided was that they were going to start custom grazing some yearlings. We kept the cows, we still have the cows, but how do you we had quite a bit of grass that we were trying to figure out how to stock. So the pros of custom grazing: it's low risk. You don't own the cattle. You don't have to call Sam and ask for a big loan. Um, put down any collateral or nothing. Virtually, you have no skin in the game. You have a set price, or at least we did, so you didn't ever have to depend on gain. Obviously, you wanted the cattle to gain because that creates a happy client. But if the cattle gained a half pound a day, or if they gained 3.5 pounds a day, it didn't matter to the price that we charged. You didn't have to worry about the markets. If the president says something that sets the market down, didn't matter. If the market went up $500, you didn't get rewarded for that either. You just had a set price, and that was the way it was. We didn't treat the cattle. We moved them and made sure they had grass, they had water. But other than that, we didn't have to really do anything as far as making sure they were healthy or anything like that. We would notify the owners, and then they came out and doctored themselves. Didn't have to. Um, well, obviously, with a set price, you know what you're going to get paid at the end of the year. But you don't have to hire trucks, inspectors, anything. You didn't have to worry about none of that. The cattle owner did all that, and you didn't have to borrow money, like I said. The cons of it is you were constantly trying to please somebody else. And we went through this pretty hard, um, with several people, I guess. They would bring cattle that didn't fit our environment, and then they might have been dry lotted and fed a hot ration. And as soon as they hit grass, they lost 100 pounds. Big, fleshy, Simmental cross yearlings that did not fit. And so then at the end of the summer, when they weighed them, well, what the heck is this average daily gain? Well, you brought fleshy cattle that weren't meant for grass. They should have went to a finish yard. This is actually a picture of us loading out custom cattle one time. The weather's not always on your side, and they want to keep them there a lot longer, which we went off of a daily rate, I guess. So the longer they stayed, the better it was for us. But that being said, if I owned the cattle, I could decide to haul them out in a 60-degree day and not a 30-degree day where it was snowing sideways. So, like I said, the owners, they have different strategies on their gains that might not align with your grass management. I'm a firm believer that best way for cattle to gain, if that's solely your goal, is to open every gate on your place and let the cattle select and let them keep selecting and eating your grass to the ground. Because if you force them to eat what you want them to eat, it's probably going to affect their gains. If you're forcing them to eat the undesirables, they're not going, in my opinion and in my personal experience, they're not going to gain as good. Reputation. When we first started this in the previous slide, that was a photo of us. There was like 3 or 4 thousand head of yearlings in there, but those cattle had coccidiosis, and so we had their manure tested, and they weren't gaining very good. Well, then, and this guy was an owner from out of state, but our reputation went down because he thought that they didn't gain good, and then he runs his mouth, and pretty soon you have, the cattle market's vast, but everybody talks and everybody's intertwined. And so it's just not good for anybody when people are disgruntled and you can't appease somebody. What I thought was that we were leaving money on the table with a set price and with a bull market. I thought that we were leaving a ton of money on the table. So 3 years ago, I just put pen to paper to see what we could do differently and if I could make it work. This is actually what I do every year at the start is I evaluate what my break even is. So on this right side, custom grazing, we charged $1.25 a day times 150 days grazing season, $187.50 one head throughout the grazing season. And that's set price. It might be adjusted a little bit if they stayed a little longer, or if it didn't rain and we had to haul them out a little earlier. But then on the left side, this was 2025, and I had buying steers at 600 pounds. See if I can get the steers at 600 pounds, buying the 1st of April. LRP value, and I don't remember if that was for October 1st or what it was for, but a 900-pound animal was valued at $2,385. So buying April 1st, 30 days in the lot, 30 days, $1.25 a day. That was probably a low price to charge, but there was a lot of excess feed in the area, and I figured that was probably pretty realistic for what it was. $37. Turn out on grass 1st of May, and so till September 1st, 123 days on grass times $1.25, $153. LRP was roughly $80 to $85. Interest at almost 7%, $63. Cody said a 1% death loss figure, and I never want a price or a surprise at the end of the season. So I always figure high at a 5% death loss. And if God forbid I would ever lose that many. But if I ran into a disaster, I didn't want an interest or a bank note that I couldn't pay off. So if I lost less than that, that was just gravy in my pocket. So that's another $92, fuel, implants, whatever. You add that all up, it's almost $450 in expenses. I knew that I could spend $1,933 on a 600-pound steer at the sale barn. And if I bought them for less than that, it increased my profits. Every day after the 1st of April that I bought it, it increased my profits, etc. That's how I work it. It's easy for me. My math might not be 100% accurate. However, it's worked the last several years for me. Is owning the cattle more work? Probably. I like going to the sale barn a lot and bidding on my own cattle. This is at Devil's Lake. You sit there all day, you eat sale barn food. It's really nostalgic for me, I guess. I just love the atmosphere. But it is more work when you could just pay somebody commission on those animals. However, if I do it and I have nothing else going on, that's again more money that I can save. Feeding, this is our own lot, I guess. So I'm feeding everything myself. That creates a whole extra amount of work. I have it all figured into my cost as far as paying myself, so it's kind of irrelevant on if I do it or if somebody else does it, as long as I have that cost figured out. Trying to figure out insurance and marketing, talking to Tyler. Tyler's my commodity guy. Sam is also my loan officer. So I talk to both of them pretty regularly on both of that stuff. I recommend anybody in here to work with Tyler just because he's extremely knowledgeable with all that stuff, regardless of how much he badmouths me. But it's always stressful when you own them, worrying about weight gain, because at the end of the day, if those cattle don't make weight, then that also affects your bottom line. When I'm owning those cattle, And I'm not saying that I'm the best grazer by any means because my weight gains aren't anywhere where I think they should be, but that is a constant worry. And like Cody, for example, runs those cattle in his corral several times a year and constantly gets weights on them throughout the year. I get a weight when I turn out, and I get a weight when I round up. And it's just kind of the way our operation works. Stress of life death situations. I mean, I had to put it wasn't either of these pens of cattle, but you get cattle conglomerated from 8 different sale barns, and they've been run through the ringer, wet, slop, trucking, different environments, and they have to go on crumbles, and then you have to monitor them, make sure nothing dies. I think this year on grass, I didn't lose a single head, but in the lot, my death percentage was at like 2.5%. So they were definitely just stressed coming in and wet spraying, whatever. The loan, collateral, more skin in the game. I mean, you guys all understand how money lending works, but it is a constant. I'm extremely conservative, and so I'm always looking at that, making sure I don't lose the place. But when, I started this 3 years ago, and I was kind of thrown into the wolves as far as the markets go. Well, at that situation, like however many cattle I was buying, but it was almost a $2 million loan that I had to have collateral for and everything, and $2 million that I wouldn't be able to pay back would be extremely detrimental. When I own them, I can manage my grass for my cattle. Um, I don't have an owner telling me, well, they should have been moved yesterday. I don't have somebody saying that it's going to be 90 degrees. You need to kick them out in those trees. Well, no, those trees were already grazed. And obviously, I'm going to try and do what's best for my cattle so that they gain the best, but I can do it because I wanted to, not because somebody told me to. Can market them based on when I want to and the weather and the markets. And so it's kind of cool just watching. I've learned a ton about marketing, watching the markets go up and down and fluctuations, and having a insurance plan in place so that I don't screw anything up in the long run. But it's extremely exciting to me to be able to see a bull market take off, market cattle through a sale barn or whatever, and then reap the benefits for myself, not watch somebody else extremely happy that they're loading their cattle on trucks off your grass and going to the bank to cash their check. It's I mean, cattlemen are all extremely independent, I feel like, and so there's an extreme sense of pride when you own the cattle, and you probably shouldn't have that mentality in the business world in any sense, I guess. It should strictly be business and leave emotion out of it. But let's face it, we're all prideful of our own things and owning our own things. That I have zero sense of pride when I'm grazing cattle for somebody else. And if I can look out in a pasture and know that all my protections are in place, I own those cattle, and I know at the end of the year, at the very minimum, I'm going to break even with a by paying for my grass and paying for my labor and all that stuff. I'm going to make the same exact dollar amount that I would by custom grazing. Then I've done my due diligence and it's good. So to me, that gives me a sense of pride. I can run the cattle that work in my environment. I mean, I bought 600-pound steers and heifers, not 900-pound sim crosses. They flesh out on these sandy hills and do good. And I know the history on them. Like I said, we got 3,000 yearlings in that had coccidiosis, and I know that I know which barn my cattle came out of. Generally, I know the producer that they came from, and so having a little bit of background story on that and helps. And then, like I've been talking, the potential to make more money. At the very minimum, I'm going to make the exact same as I would custom grazing. The things I've learned, and Cody went over this a little bit, I think, but buy cattle from markets that may be softer. Generally speaking, as you go south, south in the northern country, markets go higher. So if you can buy cattle from maybe more northern markets, it might be beneficial. In a bull market, that might not be the case at all, but traditionally that has been the case. Sell cattle at markets that are doing a good job marketing. Might not be the closest one or the one the grandpa sold at. Too many times people don't want to make somebody mad. Well, I'll just use farmers livestock as an example. It doesn't exist anymore, but the sale barn in Bismarck, We sold there for years and years and years under my grandpa because he was friends with the owner. And when dad came along, he said, I don't think we should go here. I think we're being screwed. This was way back prior to the previous owner, but way back. And so he went at that time to Wishick, and it created a little bit of some hard feelings. But if you're leaving money on the table, I feel, and then the people become complacent at these barns, and so you need to make sure they're staying honest. Protect your inventory, um, plan for the worst. If you only get half pounding dick gain or you lose 5% death, whatever, just plan for the worst so that you don't have any surprises at the end. Save money where it makes sense. Like I said, if you don't want to pay commission to a cattle buyer, go sit at the sale barn and even if it's just 1 day a week or whatever, if that makes sense for you and it works out in your scenario, go do it. Save a few bucks. It makes no difference. Truck the cattle yourself. Whatever you can do to put a little more money in your pocket by also paying yourself, I guess. Check and double check your cost of doing business. Like I said, I'm extremely conservative, and Tyler will attest to this, but I constantly call him and just make sure that I'm not missing anything because when you're dealing on such large volume of money, I don't want to make some stupid decision that could potentially put our entire operation at risk. And then connect with all your fellow peers and make sure give them your numbers. I have nothing to hold back as far as my numbers go. Let them run over your balance sheet and all that stuff and make sure that there's nothing that you're not accounting for. The very first year I didn't put in my interest cost, and thank God the market kind of took off because otherwise I would have probably been $100 back per head. Create a lot of friends, allies, and long term relationships. Talk to cattle buyers, talk to sale barn owners, talk to everybody. There's no reason why you shouldn't have a ton of friends in this game. You have nothing to hold over their head, in my opinion. Everybody's trying to do the best that they can, and at the end of the day, make the most money. There's no reason to hold animosity towards anybody. Create friends with all them people, and don't lose sleep over what the market is doing if you're protected. And that's one thing that I've kind of had to overcome. On Friday, the market was limit down. Yeah, it sucks, but I have protection in place. Maybe I won't, I've sold pretty much everything right now, but maybe I won't, I'll lose out on $10, but at least I won't lose a whole bunch of money. I'm protected. This is real. 2025 break even price on buying a 600-pound average heifer was $1,715 a head, roughly $500 expenses. I sold 2 loads in Fort Pierre on August 29th for $2,827. And this over here is Fort Pierre, but that was last year. And you'll see I have protection at 900 pounds. These were, I don't even remember when these were sold. They were almost 800. I can fluctuate based on the market as long as I'm within my window of LRP on when I want to sell them cattle. If I want to put more weight on them, I'll hold them for a while and put more weight on. Market was really running off that day or that week, whatever. And so I decided to haul some down there. So more loads this year went to Fort Pierre, Harriet, and Napoleon. Are there better markets? Video, private contract. I've never done the video thing. I did private contract, and I really like to talk to Jeff because he seems like he's got a lot of knowledge on that sort of stuff that maybe I got kind of screwed on when I did private contracts. I don't know. But a big thing is commission amongst sale barns and selling at all these different barns. I've learned a lot. North Dakota only has 8 sale barns left in the entire state. South Dakota's got 24. There's a lot more competition, and South Dakota's got way more cattle, but there's a lot more competition amongst barns trying to get cattle. Commissions are lower down there if you really do the math and look at it. North Dakota barns have taken a bit of advantage of our commissions in that sense. Save money where it makes sense. I love trucking, so I truck all my cattle. I will not pay a trucker unless absolutely necessary. However, I'm a terrible trucker, even though I have my CDL. I constantly blow tires and run out of fuel. So am I really saving money in the long run? Probably not. Uh, I've blown like 8 tires on this particular trailer, ran out of fuel twice, had my brakes lock up. Yeah, had been pulled over. Not good, but so I did have to have a load from Fort Pier to the ranch. It's 195 miles. For one load, it was $1,200. Well, if my truck only got 5 miles per gallon, it's 40 gallons of fuel, three and a quarter, $260 round trip. So I can pay myself roughly $1,000 for my time. Again, that's just more money in my pocket at the end of the day. If I'm paying myself instead of somebody else to do it, and I feel like $1,000 for 4 or 5 hours of work is fine with me. I had no idea where I was on time, but that's all I got.
Let's give Jayce a round of applause. They'll answer questions afterwards.
Again, name's Reiser. I'm going to be talking on this from strictly a custom grazing standpoint. I ranch outside of Washburn. A majority of what I run on is outside of Washburn, North Dakota. I custom graze both yearlings and pairs. I will touch on a little bit of the differences, but for most of this conversation, we're just going to be dealing with the yearlings. A little bit of history of the place I'm currently on. I run almost on all rented ground. A number of years ago, I bought a place outside of Beulah to winter some cattle on. But other than that, everything I run on is all rented. I moved on to the place that I'm currently on in 2010. Started managing in 2011. Was able to rent a fair amount of other ground directly around that area. A heavy percent, even in the early years, was custom grazing. That allowed us to build up our cow herd slowly with some of the genetics we wanted, and then also limited the amount of debt we had to take on to try and fill some of these pastures we were able to pick up. In 2014, I started a full-time job managing an elevator in Beulah, and my wife at the time, she took over running the cattle on the place. 2016, purchased that place in Beulah, and then in 2022, a divorce that I went through was finalized, and I came back to work the place that I'm currently on in the spring of 2023. So as I came back, just due to the nature of the circumstances, I'm back to custom grazing again, mainly because of the financial part of it. I don't have access to the capital anymore to be able to buy into my own herds and to do that on that side. A combination of pairs. I have some feeders and I have some breeding heifers. But once again, for this, it's mostly going to be the feeders. Pairs have been about 30% of what I custom graze. Breeding heifers at about 15%, and the majority is going to be the feeder heifers. Things that I think a person needs to consider if they're going to be looking at running feeder cattle, and by feeder cattle, I'm talking about feeder heifers, spayed heifers, or steers. Animals that at one point or that come onto the place with the intention of never seeing a bull and then going on to become meat on somebody's plate at some point in time. This last year, I really kind of had to squeeze quite hard. You got to find out, or you got to know what your cost to gain is, or expected cost to gain on the cattle coming in. Had some discussions with some potential clients for this 2025 grazing season, and it came down to that on grass, which historically is cheap gains, I could not compete with feedlots. The best I was figuring I could do was about 88 cents, and I was being told direct costs through the feedlot were about 80 cents on some of these guys. Huge to do with. We were at super cheap corn, super cheap byproducts. So it would have been financially more feasible for cattle to go in a feedlot. The one individual that I ran with this year, uh, his big thing was that cattle run in a feedlot all summer usually were about 20 cents back in the fall. And this year, with the major run we've seen, that would have extrapolated that even more. Fleshy feeder cattle coming off of or at the end of the summer, most guys don't want to buy them to continue to put them in a lot. They want some green cattle off of grass. Uh, what's the margin that you need to live off of? Because with what I'm doing, I'm running on rented land with custom grazing. I get a pretty small piece of the pie when it's all figured out at the end of it. What are you willing to live on? What are you okay with? What are your overheads that need to be paid each year? How do you factor all that together for the end of it? Myself, being a bachelor living in a trailer house, my overheads or my cost of living for the year is pretty low. You need some beef for the freezer. Well, there's a death loss. So not of the custom cattle. So what does your land base look like? And this is something that I have struggled with a little bit over the last couple years, trying to figure out on how I want to continue forward. I have multiple different areas. Like this year, I was running 6 different herds on different land bases. Some of those over historically, I've seen better gains on yearlings than others. My one that I would love to run yearlings on, which is the big pasture I've got very close to where I live, or right out the back door where I live, has consistently been one of my lower gaining pasture for gains on yearlings. And it's nice because I've got enough room for about 750 yearlings right outside the back door. But I'm struggling to get the gains that my customers are desiring. And so I'm sitting back going, okay, do I need to look at changing that up? Do I need to try and find somebody who's looking at doing breeding heifers? Do I need to expand my custom grazing of pairs? Which in and of itself, if you've got a 750 head yearling pasture, you're going to be looking at running about 400 pairs on that same land base, give or take. Are you able to do that? Are you able to find somebody that can bring those kind of animals? Um, your thoughts as you're going, or as you're thinking about this, your thoughts on dealing with someone else's money and cattle, kind of like Jayce had talked about. That's something you got to work with. It's a huge. I've been really struggling. There's been a number of you here that I've talked to in the last week because cattle came off of grass and gains were poor. The guy that I worked with is very disappointed. I'm not sure if he's going to come back next year. And he's a friend, so that makes it that much more of a mental load. Because when you're at working as a custom grazer, you are a partner in their operation. If they fail, you fail. If you fail, they fail to an extent. You're working with other people's money. You're working with other people's cattle. And it's for me, um, I'm a people pleaser, so it makes it that much more difficult when things don't work. So the few things you just want to consider from if you're looking at doing purely custom grazing. Some of the positives uh, can be a very consistent cash flow without massive amounts of debt. Like Jayce talked about, the $2 million of debt to buy a group of cattle to run. That's not a small amount of money. I mean, you're talking. I'd have a bad habit. I'd look into what is the interest payment per day on something like that and run down that rabbit hole. Um, But the way it's a way to market grass if your marketing or your price protection or your understanding of that part of the industry isn't something that's your forte. You can be locked or pretty much locked in on a price. You know what you're going to sell your grass for that season, beginning of the season, end of the season, very little variable in your cash flow on what you projected versus what actually comes in. You get to insulate against any of the market fluctuations, which also is going to be a negative because in the past 3 years, those market fluctuations have all been to the cattle owner's benefit. It's been a wonderful, wonderful time to to be owning cattle, um, and it'll be interesting and hopefully exciting to see how things go. Uh, Running yearlings, most cases you're going to run a much shorter grazing season. Bring them in whenever your grass is ready, sometime in May in most cases. A lot of guys are looking to market their yearlings end of August through end of September. Um, every once in a while, you'll have some guys that want to run them just straight to a feedlot. If they retain ownership or something like that, they may try and um, keep them a little bit longer out there. But for the most time, you're able to run larger animals, shorter time period. You're also able to really do some some performance on your soil health and on your land base in that time, because you're just dealing with larger amounts of animals. A couple of the negatives that I've have noticed: it insulates you against the market fluctuations. Like I had said, you're not able to take advantage of when things do go up, because you're locked in. Um, my negatives the last couple years, I have not been getting the gains that I was hoping to get while being able to provide my landlords with the type of management that I have told them I would do on their land. Which is kind of a difficult position I'm in, because I market myself to both the cattle owner and to the landlord. I market myself to the landlord as an individual that can improve their land. Um, some of them are actually the children. And so they have this idea in their mind of, oh, I remember coming out here as a kid and it was beautiful. Whether it was or not, I have no idea that, but they have that in their mind of the beautiful, pristine prairie that they ran around with their cousins back when they were 10 years old. And so, and there are a lot of individuals that are wanting to see land improved. They are wanting to see that land base brought up. They're excited when they can go out and say, man, there's more wildlife than I remember seeing. There's more um deer, pheasants, ducks, whatever might be the situation. And that's something that's very positive. But I could have just almost said ditto to some of Jayce's stuff, because we're hitting on a number of the same things. We're trying to do regenerative grazing on with yearlings. You're kind of fighting that battle against gains versus land management. And it's something that I need to do better. And I'm hoping as I go along, I will continue to do better. Um, what Jay said also on the reputation side of things, in the numbers of head of yearlings that I'm running, the people that are purchasing and handling those numbers is a very small group. Um, when things go wrong, it runs through the group very, very quickly. I actually had a situation where I was looking to fill a small pasture. I called up a couple of people that I had talked to. They talked to others, and due to one individual, it was, "Does he graze up by Washburn? Did he do with this individual last year?" Yep, it was. Nah, I'm gonna pass on that. I heard the gains weren't as good as I would like them to be. And a lot of these individuals, they're big cattle feeders, most of them. So they're having that grandeur of 2 pounds a day is what they're wanting to see. Um, the other tough thing that I have, or the other thing that I've noticed, is there's a fair number of these guys that are buying cattle out of a sale barn. They're bringing them in on a shrunk weight. They are loading them up and sending them to the next feed yard on a full weight. And we talked a little bit about shrink this morning. And shrink of 1% can adjust your average daily gain by anywhere from a tenth of a pound a day to 0.15 pounds a day. So shrink is a huge thing. And so when they're talking about some of these big gains that they're getting, I am a little suspect, but I I can't sit back and know for sure, because that's their business, not mine. Um, one thing to hit on the shrink side of things that I ran into this year is the working the cattle. I had to sort the group of cattle that I brought in 4 different ways, and we ended up sorting on them animals quite a bit. Had a huge amount of shrink onto the truck. This year I tried something a little bit different. Ran my contract on a base plus gain, and due to the shrink that I got, that was it didn't work out very well. I actually found out that uh, the cattle owner, he actually gained weight at the sale barn from what they weighed on the truck. So they went across the scale barn scale weighing more than on the truck. And from my own standpoint, I try and weigh my own yearlings as soon as they're on the truck and then when they walk across the scale at the sale barn, I've been consistently 4 to 6% shrink. So that was a lot of dollars that got left on the table there. So those are some of the positives and negatives that I've come across. Some of the things that a guide needs to consider if they're looking at custom grazing yearlings. Like I said, it's a different situation for each individual that's going to be working with stuff. You got to decide what is your load that you're looking to do. What is your ability to handle the marketing side, handle the finance side of things? Is that something you want to do? Because it does take custom grazing takes a lot of those things away. You're focusing on cattle, you're focusing on land. Um, do you have a positive or negative aversion to debt? Because when you just start talking about bringing in these cattle, it's huge amounts of dollars. How does that make you feel when you lay your head down at night? Is that a deal that you're wanting to deal with or not? Um, the other thing I will talk on a little bit is a contract I put together. Anybody that asks me about custom grazing, um, put together a solid contract. Try and spell out as much as you can within that so that individuals at the end of the year, middle of the year, whatever it might be, there's not gaps. One of the things that I do in my contract, I tell them straight up that I offer the ability to doctor cattle. I will call them, tell them what I'm seeing out there, but I will provide doctoring services for those cattle. It's usually a dart gun. But I also put in that contract that I am not a vet. I do not have vet training, and I am not liable for death due to misdiagnosis, which from talking to people when we started on this, that's kind of just the catch-all at the bottom. So if you end up having some problems, they aren't going to come back on you for that. But they, we all try and do the best we can for these cattle, but when we're out on pasture, misdiagnosis happens. You think it's a hoof rot issue, and so you dart them for hoof rot. And it ends up being that they got a nail in the hoof and they go down horribly bad over the next 2 weeks because you didn't realize what was going on. Various different things like that can happen, no different than running your own cattle. But just when I go back to the deal, when you're working with somebody else's cattle and somebody else's money, it elevates things that much more. So, yeah, make sure your contract is going to have cover as many things as possible. Nobody likes a super cumbersome contract, but it's going to be the safest for both the custom grazer and the cattle owner so that you know where each other stands on many different situations. Put things in there, discuss back and forth with them. Once again, you're a partnership. There's no problem sending a contract back and forth 4 or 5 times and making some adjustments that make it work better for both people. So, I guess with that was kind of what I got on the custom grazing a yearling side. I hope I was able to give you a little information. Wasn't the most cheery thing, but some of that was this last year at just trying to figure things out as I move forward. So thank you.
This is my business name, Nature's Buffet, and I'm new to this. I probably shouldn't even be up here. I've been in the business 2 years. So I previously was a farm equipment salesman for the last 15 years, and decided to move home 15 years ago, and was in the vicinity of of my family's ranch, but I was always an external helper, no decision maker, whatnot. So 2 years ago, I started venturing off after a heart attack. I decided I really got to figure out what I really care about in life, and that's when I quit chasing money, and I'm chasing life instead. So you can go click it. Here's my crew. It consists of my wife and my 2 kids. He's 10, Canute is almost 8. And then my retired father helps out quite a bit too. Go for it. So these are kind of the 3 bullet points I just came up last night. Why, how, and the challenges of what I do. Go for it. So the reason I kind of got started custom grazing is because I didn't own any land. I didn't own any cattle. And within 6 months, I had 3,000 acres of land that I could run on. So how do I jump in this game without going bankrupt? Um, I've never owned I've never owned a cow. I've never bought a cow. So it's a uncertain or it's a stressful situation for me. I'm getting better, and that's one of my future plans is to probably transition into more of a owning my own, at least not 100% custom graze, but at the moment I'm 100%. So um, I don't have any infrastructure really. I don't own a barn. I used to do hay equipment, so I have some hay equipment, but I'm actually selling that. So if you want to buy some, I'll sell it to you. But I needed to fill these pastures quickly, and through my education, I've spent the last 5-10 years going to seminars, ranching for profit, all these different types of places. You can really learn a lot of good knowledge, meet a lot of good people. But when you don't have your own operation, it's tough to connect the dots. And so I'm getting closer and closer to doing that right now. But right now I focus on soil health. Um, this year I had 600 yearlings. I maybe could have had 1,000 because of what happened, um, but I don't care what they look like. I don't care what color they are, as long as they stay in the fence. I don't give a crap. That's my mentality. I need to change that a little bit because I have ran into um, my values are different than my customers. And when I say customer, my first customer is my landlord. My second customer is the cattle owner because I have 3 landlords and I prioritize them way more than a cattle owner um, currently, just because they're more valuable to me. So that's where I prioritize my soil, and that's where I've been able to get the opportunities I have is by guaranteeing that I will improve soil, and I use the cattle as a tool. Um, yeah, I don't have any assets. 4-wheeler, polywire, you can click it, I think. So yeah, here's how we do it. I started with a vision and mission mindset of what I really wanted. If you don't know why you're doing it or why wake up in the morning, so I've really focused on that aspect. Um, I've also spent a lot of time on. I guess I have a contract up there, but not just a contract. Just my whole business structure. The egg lenders we're talking about come with a story. I have a story, and that makes it really clear on what I should and shouldn't do. Um, in my mission and vision statement, it clearly tells you what you should be doing. And so if an opportunity comes up, I don't have to ponder if I should do it or not because it's already been decided, kind of a deal. So um, in the contract, I have a 4-page contract, and you guys talked a lot about having things in the contract. Um, and I'm always adding to it. And there is some really scratch your head moments when you're across the table with a cattle owner of why do you need this in there? But I try to be as clear and concise from up front because it's a lot easier to to do it beforehand. Problems will erupt, and if you can cover all your bases, it's so much easier. I don't have a. I should have put my contract in here, but I don't have a copy of it, I guess. So if you have any questions about what's in there, by all means, please ask. But um, you put in there whatever you don't want to be liable for. I'm not liable for anything. If a cow dies, it's not my problem. If they get hit by a car on the road, I don't have insurance. The landowner does, or the cattle owner does. Um, there's really nothing that I have that's risk, minus them coming back next year. That's my big risk. So far it's been working out pretty good. I've had 3 customers for cattle owners, and they've all come back. Um, so that's a good deal. Currently, I just do May to August, May to September yearlings. I think that is a good opportunity, but gain is our biggest concern when it comes to yearlings, and there's so many different other types of cattle I could be grazing. And shoot, I work 3 months out of the year if you consider how many cattle I have. So I have 9 months of opportunity that I'm going to look to expand. I'm really looking into actually wintering cattle now. I just did some more infrastructure building, so I have winter water, and so I plan on providing an opportunity to have cattle like now through calving, whenever that is for that cattle owner. There's so many more different opportunities that you can think of besides just when the grass is green. Um, cows will eat 12 months out of the year, even in northern North Dakota. So I move cattle daily. I try to. Sometimes that doesn't work as well as it's supposed to, but um, you do have to have that balance of animal gain, animal nutrition, and soil health. But when I walk into a pasture, I look down. I don't look up. At least I try not to. Because by looking down, I should be able to know what the cow looks like without looking at her. Um, I'm getting better at that. So I have utilized Equip and Ducks Unlimited quite a bit for infrastructure improvement. So I have water, I have fences. I didn't 3 years ago. I spent a lot of time putting that stuff in. So I'm now transitioning to more of a marketing mindset of how to leave less money on the table, but yet my number one goal, back to my mission and vision, it's not chasing the dollar, it's chasing life. That's why there's a camper outside. I just got back from a 15-day vacation. I can't do that if I own cattle. So, but when I move, I observe, clip, and weigh every time. At least that's the goal. Some days I'm rushed, but I'm trying to do things differently than my dad did. So, and it's working so far. So go for it. Okay, advantages. I probably talked to a few of you about these, but yeah, your income. I don't know if I've heard this from the other guys, but all my assets are not tied up in my cattle. I have investments elsewhere. So just because I don't own cattle doesn't mean I don't have investments. And so you can be more diverse. You can be more broad. Yeah, the cattle market's scary to me right now. I'm learning about it, but if all my eggs were in that basket, I would not be sleeping at night. Freedom, yeah, I went camping. I don't have a lot of things holding me down to my lifestyle or to my farm 9 months out of the year. We can go do things whenever we want. Risk, write a really good contract. If you can think of it happening, it will. So put it in there, I never guarantee gain because you don't know what they're going to bring. And if you're upfront and telling that, one of my producers wanted to have like a sliding scale on I get paid so much per head per day. And so they wanted kind of a sliding scale, which I think is an advantage because that will encourage me to have a little more gain. Right now, it really doesn't matter until they don't come back. So I'm toying around with adding some sort of sliding scale for gain in my contract, but at the moment I'm really apprehensive of doing that. So, but supplementation and I guess I don't have that on there, but I do. I'll like dart the cattle if there's foot rot or something simple. Um, and I've had the conversation about supplementation, or if we're concerned about gains, we can supplement anything we want. I I think I'm open to that, but for a price, because that takes time. So I'm selling my time, and so if someone wants me to feed cake or something every day, I'll definitely do that, but I have to be compensated for it. The minute I brought that up, all of a sudden we didn't have to supplement anymore. So knowing your customer, one of the disadvantages of custom grazing is you're a people pleaser. I pleased farmers, over 200 farmers for 15 years selling farm equipment, and pleasing one or two is simple compared to 200. So, but communication, you'll please them as long as you tell them what's up. Either you can tell your story or somebody else will, and you're not going to like what that other person says. So just say it yourself. Um, that's what I found is really really crucial. So, um, my inventory, yeah, I'm sure under $10,000 is all I started with, and you don't have to make a lot if you don't spend it all. So, I guess that's what I'm working with. So, okay, you can click it. Disadvantages here. I know I'm leaving a lot of money on the table. Um, the risk and the lifestyle is more important to me at the moment. I'm sure there'll come a day where I need more financial, but I'm making cash flow now, so that's all that matters. Um, Finding the right animals, I think that will be a hindrance. I've been pretty lucky, I think, but I know I've heard horror stories, so I'm sure you can imagine what people will try to give you. They'll never give you the best animals they have, so it's always the junk. Um, and I'm okay with if my customers are not making money, then I'm doing something wrong. So you have to make sure that they're making money. If you're greedy, you're not in the right business. So go for it. I think differently than a lot of people probably. Um, and I got to make sure that I tell people why I think that way. It comes back to the communication. If you don't, we all have a reason. We just got to figure out why we think that way. So if you figure out why you think that way, it's a lot easier to tell people why that. Most of the time, we don't even know why we think that way. So you really sit down and ask yourself that, and you'll learn a lot about yourself. I try to communicate daily. Well, probably weekly for sure, but sometimes throughout the grazing season, daily with my customers, and it can be a simple text. Take a picture of something funny. It's communication. It doesn't have to be rocket science of something really hard. With my landlords, I'm always sending them a new forb or new plant I found that and they don't know anything about it. Most of my landlords live in town, and they're the next generation. They don't really know anything about it, but whatever I'm teaching them, they all of a sudden know. And so I really have the power to educate them into what I want them to know. If I don't tell them, somebody else will, and I'm not going to like what they have to say. So, go for it. I think that might be it. Yeah, that's I guess my story. Did I forget anything? my big question was why am I going to do this when I decided to quit a really good paying job and I get to wake up every morning and not have it stress. So that's my why is low stress, big happiness. So thank you.
I got a kick out of Sam when he said young people come into his bank and say, well, how much do you want? And they say as much as I can get. Uh, Reminded me of my late father's, one of his sayings was, if a little bit was good, a little bit more would always be better. And so that's kind of made me snicker while I was sitting there thinking. And then, of course, him and Tyler both brought up the fact that you have to do something, right? You got to do something. Many of you know I used to play basketball long ago before I had bulging discs, and I had a coach, a basketball coach, that he would scream. He'd be like, "Do something out there, Oswald," and then of course he'd call a timeout. And I said, "Coach, I thought I was doing something," and then he would say, "Oswald, every time you think, you hurt the team." So I really didn't know what the hell to say, right? And the last thing I'll bring up before I actually talk my talk is, Sam, I'd really like to visit with you afterwards about that picking a wife thing. I get a kick out of that. But anyway, I'm glad to be here today. Many of you know me. I chose to go last because I think it's important to hear from these young people. Uh, their stories are wonderful, and I can jabber on or jabber off for as long as we need to. If any of you want to get hungry and leave early, I'm okay with that. I won't be offended. Uh, a couple of things, I think, a little history about Oswald Ranch. We've been uh, multi-paddock adaptive grazing and running with the holistic approach since around 2007. And so we've got a few years into this deal, and it's a different mindset, right? I grew up in a very traditional setting. My dad was a hard charging, good cattleman, excellent rancher, but didn't know anything about finance or books. And just like Tyler and Sam mentioned, he didn't really care too much about that. I always tell everybody we used to do our book. He did his bookkeeping in a shoebox, and that's exactly what he did, because he'd sooner been on the back of a horse or working with the livestock. And that doesn't work in today's world, because as you've talked to or listened to these three young individuals up here today, there's lots and lots of dollars at stake. And you have to be on your toes, and you have to be a bookkeeper. And I think Sam's analogy of the three-legged stool, I think, is a good one. I think with the multi-paddock adaptive grazing and the holistic approach that we use on Oswald Ranch, is what it's done for us is it's given us a lot of options, right? And that's important. We're not pigeonholed into something that we need or have to do all the time. And that leads us to, why I'm up here to talk about the challenges of grazing yearlings or custom grazing or what have you. We run at the current time, we're running probably about 165 mother cows. We're down on our cow numbers a little bit because I've been crippled up, and, we're just facing some labor shortages and things like that. But we also graze our own yearlings. And so we overwinter our cattle and we graze our yearlings. And that's really worked well for us. So I have some experience in grazing our own yearlings. And I really like, and I wrote this down, Jason, the soil health type of cattle. I'm here to tell you, folks, they really don't exist. If you are going to find them, you really have to look hard, because the cattle today are bred and genetically modified, if you will, to be standing in a feedlot eating. And that's just the plain truth of it. We've been breeding our own type of cattle on our place for decades, and we've still got a long, long way to go. And we keep some of our own bulls now and we breed them. But I like that term. I'm going to use that in the future, Jason, that soil health type of cattle, because that's exactly what we're looking for. And I think you heard that from these three guys, young gentlemen, excuse me, that we have these cattle out there that don't perform very well on grass. And then, of course, you combine that with the owners of these cattle. And I think Cody Kaloji said it too. Everyone loves their cattle, right? They're the best cattle ever. I think the same thing. But I also know it's not true. But that's what they're up against, being custom grazers. And so I thought, and I had heard people tell me about this, that this was going to happen in the custom graze. And again, with the flexibility we've built into our ranch and into our operation. So I took in some custom grazing yearlings, and I did that for 3 or 4 years. And I'm here to tell you as well that that's exactly what happened. The cattle didn't perform. I dealt with friends of mine, and that's all fine and good, and we're still friends. But the cattle just didn't perform. And they had this expectation that these cattle were going to do so many pounds, or they were going to do this, and they weren't, they would be close some years, not so close the next year. And generally speaking, and I think these three guys have all figured it out, and I think everyone in this room knows this too, that we have to be honest and say, if we're going to run a certain type of grazing system that's going to be good for the resource, we will never beat a season-long grazing system. Never, ever, ever. And the late, great Kenny Miller, he told me that long ago, and he was right. And I'm like, well, Kenny, then, what's the deal with that? And he talked about short-term economic gain at the expense of the resource. And that's what happens. And guys like Gene Govan, who are sitting directly in front of me, know this perfectly well too, that they focus on the resource and they focus on profit per acre. One of the other statements was made, and I think it was a good one. I think it was Sam, that production doesn't drive profit. It doesn't. We're trained in this world nowadays in production ag to deal in bushels and pounds, and we need to be trained in profit per acre. That's what we need to focus on. We don't need to wean the heaviest calves. As all of you know, again, with our system that we run, we start calving on Oswald Ranch the 25th of May, and we end about the first week in July. I could really care less how heavy my calves wean. It just doesn't matter to me. But it does matter to me how much profit I make per acre of property that I own, rent, lease, or whatever you do. And that's important. So, that being said, the custom grazing thing has its pros and cons, and I think we've beat this horse to death as far as that, but we know that, again, one of the huge cons is the type of cattle that we run or that we have access to, and this attitude that they're supposed to get a certain amount of gain. I think gain on cattle is a lot like what we know about our bookkeeping prowess in farming and ranching. We don't really know, we just kind of guess. And I used to feed a lot of cattle in a feedlot. And of course, I've got experience in that. And what you see is unless you have a scale in front of you, and I think Cody Kaloji will attest to this, you're guessing a lot of the time. And these guys think, well, I've got these types of cattle. They should gain 2.15 pounds per day. And in reality, they never would even get close to that. And so we really need to do some education, some information and education on cattle gain and what goes on, or else work with some of our purebred people. And I mean, I'm not here to offend anyone, but they need to start thinking that if we're going to run these grass-based systems, or these cattle still have to eat grass, they are ruminants, last time I checked, that we need to start thinking differently in that aspect, or else uh, start raising some of our own bulls and doing our own genetics, which I find it laughable. I will tell you with the utmost certainty, if someone would have told you 25 years ago that I'd be raising my own bulls, I'd have laughed in their face, because I knew guys that were doing that at the time and I was laughing at them. And that's ironic, I think. But the other thing that uh, we dealt in, and I've moved into this lately, again with custom grazing, obviously you don't have a huge outlay of cash, but we've actually started grazing different classes of livestock. And so this was something new to me. And so this year we dabbled in a bunch of butcher cows. And what that really did is it opened our eyes to a couple things for me, for sure. One, uh, Darrell is not the cowboy he used to be, because when you buy other people's butcher cows, you generally are buying, a lot of trouble. And you got to have good fences. You got to be quick on your feet. Uh, I've got pretty good fences, but I'm here to tell you I'm not very quick on my feet anymore. And so, but we dabbled in that, and we I played around with the Doug Ferguson. I just admire Cody a lot. I admire a lot of young people that are doing great things and willing to try some things. But I went to Doug Ferguson school this spring, and if you know or have heard of Doug Ferguson, he's the cattle master, and he will tell you that. He's got some pride in him. I'll say that, but he is one hell of a teacher, and I would encourage people, if you're interested in something like that, to go to it, because I took a similar class in 2014, and I didn't walk away with nearly as much information as I did when Doug Ferguson taught it. And I guess I shouldn't be doing that. That's a plug for him, right, Trish? Could I get in trouble for that? Or anyway, long story short, on these butcher cows, the cost of gain and the gain themselves for the cattle, had we not gained a lot on the bullish market, we wouldn't have done very well, because again, these cattle came from all over Montana, all over North Dakota, and there was enough of them there to have a pretty good test. And the good cattle gained pretty well, and the poorer cattle, I think, didn't gain at all or even backed up, although they all looked better. Obviously, after we were at about 4 months out on grass, they all cleaned up. But when we laid them across the scale, we were right at just a pound a day gain, and we weren't even touching that. And my jaw kind of dropped when I seen that. But again, we were running them through a grazing system. We were leaving lots of grass behind, uh, and we weren't using the resource up. And that's kind of the experience that we had with them butcher cows. So I don't know what we're going to dabble in next, but again, I can't state enough how the mindset of soil health and soil regeneration has given us lots and lots of options across the board. And I emphasize that to young people. And I think these three here, gentlemen here, are very good examples of that, that when you think out of the box and you can do some things, you don't have to have that traditional mindset. 2-3 years ago, I talked at a young farmers and ranchers conference in Bismarck, and one of the individuals was on the panel with me, and he was a nice young man, but he continually brought up that he was having difficulty getting in to the business further because of the price of property and land, and he couldn't expand. And of course, he spoke before me, and I did bring up the fact to him that if you run a grazing system, if you were willing to move cows daily or even every week or even every 2 weeks, more than likely you could buy another half a ranch than what you have by doing just that. And you wouldn't have to write any check at all. And I sat down later with that young man and explained it to him how it worked. And it dawned on him, and I think that's what he's doing now. He's running a grazing system. He's increased his carrying capacity. And again, this doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen. And I think we have to be cognizant of that too in the industry, that as these land prices get expensive and the resources get expensive, our costs are skyrocketing. I think, that the three gentlemen this morning did an excellent job of explaining all that. We have to become more resourceful and we have to utilize our resources better. So with that, I think 12:45 was lunch, and that would leave us 5 minutes for questions, and that's probably good. And again, I appreciate the opportunity. I really appreciate these young guys up here talking, and because that's what it's really all about, and the good and the bad and all that. So thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Derek.
Thank you, Darrell. Thanks. Let's give the panel another round of applause. I think Darrell summarized this panel pretty well in the last 15 minutes, but I think one big thing is they all kind of referred to it was reputation, relationships, and opportunities. And in the grazing world, opportunities are abundant. We just got to figure out how to make it work. With that, we'll open it up for questions. We got 4 minutes because I know everybody's hungry. You can holler too if you want, but we want to get it on video, so.
Loaded question. How do you find good grass yearlings? That's where I'm at right now.
I think I kind of repeated it. They don't exist. No, they do. I shouldn't say that. I'm a bit negative, but it's not easy. You got to be really careful, especially when you're custom grazing, especially. Somebody like Jayce that goes to the sale barn and knows and stuff, you can pick them kind of yourself. But if you're going to find some guy, Joe Schmo off the street, and he wants to bring you his cattle, you better look at him first, because they're going to probably be some hay burning buggers, and they might look like a group of giraffes running out there in the pasture.
Generally, the cattle you want at the sale barn, 5 other people do too. So you're going to pay for them if you really want to get them. You end up having to cut costs and probably get something that's less than ideal.
Bison or sheep or something else might be the best answer too. I'm looking into other options. We're stuck in a paradigm that we have to have cows, so maybe if they don't exist, there's lots of other things out there that might make it work.
Well, that my answer is the same as these guys, and I tried getting some good grass genetics quite a number of years ago, but barns were raising black Angus bulls at the time, so it didn't work with my herd. he says it's a loaded question. He raised some pretty good grass-based bulls back in the day when he was his own cow herd, but Darrell hit on something that's probably just as important as anything is keeping your own and on. And I think my mic is half on, half off. But there's something to be said on the epigenetic side. There's something that happens when we conceive, birth, grow, and grow out our own cattle on our own land bases under our own management. And I think under our own management is another thing that really changes things. I ran cows for a number of years that were supposed to be out of he was one of the hardest guys on his own cattle. He winter grazed year round, or winter grazed, had his cattle on grass pretty much year round, was very, very hard on his cattle. And his breed up year after year was actually quite well. When we bought some cattle from him, moved them into our management, which I thought would be easier on them than what he did, our fallout was higher than his. But we had slightly different management, and I think cattle changing management as well as changing location affects them.
Any more questions?
My question is for Jay and Jason. When you're custom grazing, to me, a yearling is not a yearling, is not a yearling, is not a yearling, right? If you charge whatever, $1.20 a day for a 9 weight or an 8 weight coming in versus a 5 weight, a 9 weight's gonna or an 8 weight's gonna eat a lot more than a 5 weight. Do you guys have a sliding price scale with the incoming weights?
Yeah. Since I'm new, I really went down to the math, but basically I figure out how much, 3% of their body weight, divide that out is what, 21 pounds a day to 25 pounds a day. So I have a sliding scale to figure out what exactly they're eating. Yeah. So if like this year I had 7.5, 750 pounds come in. The year before I was at 600, and yeah, I had a difference. So, because my thought is, if I'm focusing on soil health, my numbers are all pounds per acre. It's not head per acre, it's pounds. So it basically correlates back to pounds per acre.
I did not ins- I've worked with my custom grazing client on the yearlings. He's a good friend of mine, so we end up being in conversation quite often. I have a pretty good understanding of where he's going to be bringing in for cattle. Um, this year they came in quite a bit heavier than expected, just because of how nice the winter was. Gains on for most guys this winter were really, really good as well. But I've tried to do that, and I've met a fair amount of pushback. Um, but the guys that I've worked with have been of a little more of a conventional mindset, and they're like, it's really not that big of a difference. And I'm like, it is, but this isn't a hill I'm willing to die on, so be it.
I also make sure that they come weighed in. Everyone says, "Oh, they weighed 800 pounds." Well, really, they're 850. So I require a ticket. They usually just go across the elevator scale on the way to my place or something. But I require that both in and out, just so I know if they gained or not. I mean, it doesn't really matter to me, but I need to know that information so I can improve my skills for next year.
One thing that we do is probably one of the best things we've ever spent money on was a scale. And like Darrell said, I mean, you can think one is about 800 pounds and it might be 7 or whatever. I'm just a terrible judge, absolutely terrible. But that way you can at least moderate throughout the summer, like, okay, and relay to your customers, they've been gaining really good up until July and we've hit a summer slump. Do we want to supplement? Whatever. Just that communication, I think, is really good. And I I would recommend that to you guys if you get the chance, or even check weigh, put a stock trailer, put 20 in a stock trailer, weigh 2 loads, give a good average.
I'm also excited to learn about the automatic weigh systems that you put at the water tanks now with technology coming. That's it's on my short list. Because yeah, if you don't know where you're at, you'll go around in circles. So
For those of you that are leasing land, do you want to talk a little bit about your leases that you have? Are they short term, long term? I'm assuming they're not a year to year.
my leases are probably 3 to 5 year, and I think in the next go around of new contracts, they will be more like 10. At least if I have anything to say about it, but my landlords are realizing that my goals are not attainable in a short term window, and I think they're okay with that. So, um, yeah, the longer the better for me. So,
Most of well, I've got a little bit all over the board. I've got some longer term leases. I've got some year to year leases. The year to year leases I have been with people that I've got relationships built up with. Can work through some of the things. I just picked up some new pasture, so of course they didn't want to do anything longer term with that. Um, and that's understandable. The third one that I have year to year leases on is a odd situation because it's in a trust. And the mother is getting up there in age. And then as soon as she passes, or when she passes, it actually becomes split to the heirs and they get individual parcels. So that's the reason why that one has been a year to year, because the brothers quasi get along, but I don't think they have the same mindsets. Um, so that's been the part of it. The other thing is that I didn't talk about, and with what pasture rents are looking to do, and I can tell you that across the road from stuff I rent, that grazer is paying double what I'm paying for cash rent. I think cash rents in my area are going to go stupid in the next 2 years. Um, if they go that way, I already said it's very difficult to compete with feedlot cost of gains on yearlings. I don't know if yearlings are going to be feasible with the quality and quantity of grass we grow in my particular area, just because it's going to be so much cheaper to put them in a feedlot unless we see um, corn, soybeans, byproducts, things like that make a big bounce.
Any more questions? If not, let's give our panel another round of applause for their expertise today.